Economic developments during the Renaissance. The Renaissance, spanning roughly from the 14th to the 17th century, marked a period of profound cultural, intellectual, and economic transformation in Europe. Economic developments during this period were closely intertwined with the broader social and political changes of the time, including the rise of humanism, the growth of cities, and the emergence of powerful nation-states. The Renaissance laid the groundwork for modern economic systems by stimulating commerce, trade, banking, and new economic philosophies that would eventually culminate in the age of mercantilism. 1. Overview of the Renaissance economy. The Renaissance economy was characterized by a shift away from the agrarian, manorial economy of the Middle Ages towards a more diversified system that emphasized trade, commerce, and finance. Several key factors contributed to these changes: urbanization and the growth of cities. European cities, particularly in Italy, began to grow in size and importance during the Renaissance. Cities like Florence, Venice, and Genoa in Italy, and later Amsterdam and London, became hubs of economic activity, fostering trade, manufacturing, and banking. The decline of feudalism. As the manorial system that dominated medieval Europe declined, particularly in Western Europe, a more market-oriented economy emerged. Peasants gained more freedom to sell their goods and labor, while lords increasingly engaged in cash-based economic transactions, rather than relying solely on the feudal system of rents and services. Technological innovations such as improved shipbuilding techniques, the printing press, and advancements in navigation allowed for more efficient trade, communication, and dissemination of knowledge. These developments fueled economic expansion by facilitating long-distance commerce and the spread of new economic ideas. 2. Trade and commerce. Trade and commerce flourished during the Renaissance, with several important developments that reshaped the European economy. Expansion of trade networks. Italian city-states like Venice and Genoa were central players in Mediterranean trade, importing goods like silk, spices, and luxury items from the Middle East and Asia. They served as intermediaries between Eastern and Western markets. Over time, as European navigators explored new routes, trade networks expanded beyond the Mediterranean to include the Atlantic and eventually the New World. The Age of Exploration. The Renaissance coincided with the early stages of the Age of Exploration. Portugal and Spain were the first European nations to explore overseas territories. Portuguese explorers such as Vasco da Gama opened new trade routes to India and the East Indies, while Spanish expeditions led by Christopher Columbus and others reached the Americas. These voyages of discovery opened up vast new markets and sources of wealth, particularly in the form of gold, silver, and valuable raw materials like sugar, tobacco, and spices. Colonial expansion. European nations, particularly Spain and Portugal, established colonies in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. These colonies became vital sources of raw materials and precious metals, which fueled European economic growth. The influx of silver from the New World, for example, had a profound impact on global trade and wealth accumulation in Europe. Rise of merchants and guilds. The Renaissance saw the rise of a powerful merchant class, which played a crucial role in trade and economic development. Merchant families like the Medicis in Florence, and powerful trading companies like the Fugger banking dynasty in Germany, became key economic players. In addition, guilds, associations of artisans and merchants, regulated local trade and production, ensuring quality control and protecting their members' interests. 3. Banking and finance. The Renaissance period witnessed significant advancements in banking and finance, particularly in northern Italy and later in other parts of Europe. Emergence of banking institutions, the growth of trade and commerce, necessitated new financial mechanisms. Italian city-states, especially Florence, became renowned for their banking systems. Families like the Medicis established powerful banking houses that provided loans, exchanged currencies, and facilitated international trade. Florence's rise as a financial hub also introduced important financial instruments such as bills of exchange and letters of credit, which enabled merchants to conduct business over long distances. Development of doubloonetry bookkeeping. One of the most significant innovations in Renaissance banking was the development of doubloonetry bookkeeping, first documented by Luca Pacioli in 1494. This system allowed for more accurate and transparent accounting, helping merchants and bankers keep detailed records of their financial transactions and understand their profitability. Growth of capital markets during the late Renaissance. Amsterdam and other northern European cities became centers for the development of early capital markets. Stock exchanges emerged as investors sought to finance overseas ventures and trade expeditions. The Dutch East India Company (VOC), established in 1602, was one of the first companies to issue shares to the public, marking the birth of modern corporate finance. 4. Manufacturing and industry. While agriculture remained the dominant economic activity for most Europeans during the Renaissance, there were important developments in manufacturing and industry, particularly in cities. Textile production. The textile industry was one of the most important industries in Renaissance Europe. Italian cities like Florence were famous for producing high-quality woolen fabrics, which were exported across Europe. The city's wealth and cultural dominance were closely tied to its textile production, mining and metallurgy. The discovery of new mineral resources, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, contributed to economic growth. Silver mining in regions like Saxony and Bohemia became highly profitable, while advances in metallurgy improved the production of weapons, tools, and other metal goods. Printing and publishing. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in the mid-15th century revolutionized the dissemination of knowledge. The printing industry flourished, particularly in cities like Venice, where publishers printed books, maps, and other works that contributed to the spread of Renaissance ideas and the expansion of education. The ability to also stimulated the rise of a literate middle class. 5. Economic theories of the Renaissance. Mercantilism. As Europe transitioned from the Renaissance to the early modern period, new economic theories emerged to explain and justify the rise of nation-states, colonial expansion, and the increasingly global nature of trade. Mercantilism became the dominant economic philosophy from the late Renaissance into the 17th and 18th centuries. Basic tenets of mercantilism. Mercantilism emphasized the importance of accumulating wealth, particularly gold and silver, as the foundation of national power. Mercantilists believed that a nation's wealth could be increased through a favorable balance of trade, in which exports exceeded imports. Governments were encouraged to support manufacturing and trade by imposing tariffs on foreign goods and creating monopolies for certain industries. Colonialism and mercantilism. European powers, particularly Spain, Portugal, England, and France, used mercantilist principles to justify their colonial policies. Colonies were seen as sources of raw materials that could be extracted and sent back to the mother country, while also serving as markets for manufactured goods. This created a closed economic system, where the colonies were economically dependent on their European overlords. Role of the state in the economy under mercantilism. The state played an active role in the economy. Governments granted monopolies to certain industries, regulated trade through tariffs and quotas, and promoted exports. Monarchs and rulers saw a strong economy as essential to maintaining their political power, leading to increased state intervention in economic affairs. 6. Impact of Renaissance economic developments. The economic developments of the Renaissance had far-reaching consequences for Europe and the world. Rise of capitalism, the expansion of trade, the growth of cities, and the development of banking and finance laid the foundation for modern capitalism. Merchants and entrepreneurs began to accumulate wealth and invest it in new ventures, paving the way for the capitalist economies of the modern world. Global trade networks. The Renaissance period saw the beginnings of a truly global economy. Trade routes expanded to connect Europe with Africa, Asia, and the Americas. European exploration and colonialism brought new goods, wealth, and resources into Europe, but it also had devastating effects on indigenous populations and led to the exploitation of colonized territories. Shift in social structures. The growth of commerce and trade led to the rise of a bourgeoisie, or merchant class, which gradually gained power and influence. This shift in economic power began to challenge the traditional, feudal and aristocratic social structures, especially in urban centers. Cultural exchange and intellectual growth. The Renaissance economy, particularly through trade and exploration, facilitated cultural exchange between Europe and other parts of the world. Knowledge of science, mathematics, and philosophy from the Middle East and Asia flowed into Europe, contributing to the intellectual developments of the Renaissance.